all our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
So as we've been talking about for years, they're bringing in the digital ID.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament.
We are going to transform the relationship between citizen and state because it is absolutely important and vital that we do so.
All UK citizens will have to have one. Well, the plan is that we're going to roll this out by the end of Parliament.
My question is, what if I don't?
Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
It's all coordinated, which is the backbone of every plan they have for the future. Like this part has to be forced down our throats to make the whole rest of it work.
The rule will be that you can't work if you don't have digital ID. And the reason for that is that too many people are working illegally.
Absolutely, totally coordinated. You know, it wasn't until COVID in the last 4 years that we really were able to see how easily all these mega corporations and governments can coordinate with each other right in lockstep when they really want to for something that they've all decided benefits them.
Australians won't have to pull out their licence at the pub anymore under a gold standard digital ID being developed. Government Services Minister Bill Shorten is today unveiling the new initiative. It means when you enter a club or hotel, a digital token will be sent to that business to verify you are who you say you are.
And this is despite the fact that the dangers around this are real. This isn't just about a bunch of people that don't want to move into the high-tech future.
So what does the WEF Partnership Against Cybercrime want? They're very open that they want a regulated internet. So essentially what this public-private partnership that the WEF is pushing for is for every person's access to the internet to be tied to a digital ID.
This is about the fact that we all know that these entities are not trustworthy with this kind of data. And the big push right now in the UK specifically is...
Breaking in the UK right now, digital veteran cards have officially launched and are said to be serving as a case study for digital ID. The card, it's not a card, is it? It's on your phone.
It's pretty fantastical to behold.
You must have ID, mandatory digital ID, in order to work, because we have to stop illegal working.
That is our totally and utterly dishonest Prime Minister at every single level. If you are a foreign worker in Britain, you already have to show a form of digital ID as a foreign worker to your employer on your phone.
This crafty scheme was not in Labour's manifesto. Even the Cabinet thinks this whole thing is a fantasy. The Secretary of State cannot even bring herself to tweet about it. Why does the Prime Minister keep handing her his steaming messes to scoop up?
First up, digital ID. 4 words you need to learn, and fast. I will not comply.
Digital IDs. This is something we need to fight back against as the people. We need collective strength here, where we resist mass surveillance, we resist the constant need for the government to tell us what to do.
The BRIC card is not about making your life easier. It's about making you easier to track, control and punish if you step out of line across whatever line of the day is deemed important.
Groups like Together, headed up by Alan Miller, and also Big Brother Watch and Sophie
We'll talk to them later.
have been warning about this, and to be honest, I thought they were being a little bit paranoid. But the truth is I was wrong, and they are right to have acknowledged that this continuity Blairism just won't go away. This is unneeded. This is an overreach. It is dangerous to let the government intrude in your privacy in such a fashion.
Keir Starmer, the globalist puppet communist scumbag, announces his desire for digital ID and the fact that he's making it compulsory. I'm never, ever, ever going to engage with your digital ID.
Starmer is treating the public like we're complete idiots. He's used the pretext to rehash a very old policy that's really unpopular. And he's thought that by tapping into these concerns and then talking about patriotism, that he could sell it into the public in a new way. That's backfired. You don't understand patriotism at all. You don't understand British values, because this is about as un-British as it gets. We've always rejected ID cards, and we're going to reject them this time around.
This is not about Luddites versus modernisers. This is about the fact that Labour cannot resist its big, fat socialist dreams. Centralised databases, state mandations, big money, the exclusion of private sector expertise. Why create this honeypot for hackers? How much is this going to cost? And why should we trust Labour to be the verifier of someone's identity when during the Data Act's passage they would not even commit to recording someone's sex accurately?
Damn! Last year you had the UK Department for Science, Innovation and Technology putting out a Christmas video about how the young kids are going to get to use their phone for their ID this year. And they show this guy go in with his wallet.
Right, mate. Right, mate. Can I get a pint of lager, please?
Yeah, of course. Can I just see some ID?
Yeah, no worries. I've got it somewhere here.
You know, when you just can't pull out a wallet, it's so hard. Having a wallet is so hard. That's why we've had that forever. This commercial reminds me of those infomercials, those first world problem infomercials where somebody's doing something in the kitchen that we've all done a bajillion times, but they just can't do it because there's got to be a better way.
You roll, you press. Now your bathroom looks a mess. And why is it impossible to get out the last drop of toothpaste? There's got to be a better way.
You know what? Here's an idea. If you can't pull out a wallet without throwing everything on the floor and freaking out, maybe you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. I don't know. It's a thought I had. Like, maybe that's not a good choice. Maybe you should reevaluate your life decisions.
I know it's a surprise for everyone, but I don't get asked for my ID anymore. But for loads of young people, they get asked all the time when they want to buy a drink. So we're changing the law so that next Christmas, young people will have their ID on their phone, so they won't have all of the hassle of needing to get ID.
Anyway, they're trying to just make this seem like it's going to be so smooth and cool and awesome. But here's the problem with this, okay? Because there's a bunch of problems. We've already talked about ad nauseum on this channel almost, it feels like, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, smart cities, and the levels of surveillance and control required to run these systems. They are continuous feedback loops that require constant data to work. That's what they eat. They eat data and they need it constantly to function. So having the government, who I'm sure we all trust, right? 1000%, especially in the last 5 years, really trustworthy institutions, definitely somebody you'd want to tell all of your intimate secrets to.
The trust between the people of this country and governments is at an all-time low.
Everything about yourself, everything you do, everywhere you go, everything you buy. You definitely want the government to have all of that about you in one place. That's super great. And not a threat at all, because as we've seen, they've been totally even-handed and normal about people having opinions online that disagree with the government, dissent. We've all seen that that's been handled really stellarly, right? That's been handled quite well.
Basically, Section 19 refers to spreading what we say like racial hatred. So you've posted something online that we believe is spreading racial hatred.
Twitter, Facebook, what?
I can't explain too much. It's just to give you the context beforehand.
It'll be put to you in an interview. What, you're taking me away now?
Yes, so you're under arrest, so you're going to Harrogate, unfortunately.
You're taking me to Harrogate in the middle of the night over a tweet?
I am, unfortunately.
Is this what you signed up the police to do?
This is my role.
So there's no problem with this. It's insane. Everything that's going on is insane, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. It's asinine. This is so dumb. It's as if they wrote 1984 and then went, okay, we're all going to go get in that now. We're going to live there. Do you want to come? It's going to be super fun. That's what this is like. And watching them try to extol the virtues of this with a straight face after everything they've done to lose trust with the public is it's an amazing shit show to see. This kind of system, and we've said it for years now, you'd be hard-pressed to want this kind of One Ring level Lord of the Rings power in the hands of any entity, really, at all. You would be hard-pressed to find any organization or institution that you would want to give this level of information about yourself in one centralized location to, even in the best of circumstances, right?
Now, I think everybody can agree, we don't trust the government, so why would you trust them with your information?
We just so happen to be in the worst of them, I think. We're probably in the most lowest trust society in these Western countries, especially, that we've been in many, many, many decades with this technology. So this is the worst time to be handing off this level of power over your life to these governments and to these corporations. It's insane. It really is. So first, let's talk about why this is not a good idea, just on the top of things. The top of things is that even if the government says, we're only going to bring this in right now to only do this one function, as you know, and as I know, and as we have all seen, governments change, and governments take power when they decide to, and governments do things that's way outside of the purview of what they were ever even consented to or created for in the first place, and they do it all the time under the guise of whatever, emergencies, war, whatever they think of, whatever.
A state that basically thinks that the only way they can govern us is to survey us, is to snoop on us, is to keep tabs on us, is something that we should see, and the word you use is quite right, sinister.
So that's the first thing. And there are articles all over that you can find about what some of these dangers are. This one's from the New Scientist. It was written just a couple days ago. This journalist is talking about usage creep, right? The government might start using such a platform once it has it all up and running and has everybody on it in much more invasive ways than they originally promised. Because of course they will. That's the thing. I don't understand the security theater people. The ones that are like, but it's for my safety. The government is going to make you safe. When has that happened? Can someone please show me when we have been made safer by any of this power and control that's been given over? The safety that the government promises you is like when your parent comes in when you're a little kid and you said there's a monster under the bed, and the parent doesn't even pretend to look under the bed and just says, it's safe, go back to sleep.
You'll be asleep before you know it. Good night, Billy.
With the amount of money that has been put into these systems and the amount of people that have worked on them to build them ever since computers became a thing, if we were going to be safe, we'd be safe already, okay? This is not it's a growing, new, changing threat. It is not. The growing, new, changing threat is coming from these governments. That's what it's coming from. It's not coming from the average person. I'm sorry, but no. It's safety theater. It's an illusion at best. The government can't keep you safe, and it won't keep you safe, and it actually has no vested interest in doing so, because every time something bad happens, they pounce on it for more power and move in the direction of more authoritarianism and control. So that's not a thing. But this New Scientist journalist is saying here, what happens when a government implements a digital ID on your phone that's supposed to be for verifying your citizenship status when you apply for a job or whatever? At a basic level, this app will snuggle up to all the other apps on your phone, possibly sharing data with them. Some of these apps have access to sensitive information, like bank accounts, doctor's appointments, personal conversations, and photos. These apps are already gathering information about you that you don't even realize most of the time, such as your location, your spending habits, other apps on your phone, all kinds of stuff. There are companies that specialize in extracting this data from, say, a dating app and selling it to a third party, and that includes government agencies. So the only thing that's supposedly protecting people in the UK right now from a government app that tracks their location by tapping into this unrelated data that's just all in the phone apps is the government itself. So there's a lot of trust. This is all based on trust. You have to trust this government that they're going to do what they said they were going to do with this. And what I'm saying is, why would anybody do that at this point, in the year of our Lord, 2025? Why would anybody trust governments to do what they said they were going to do. There's a usage creep trap here. It's being pointed out that a government could start using this ID in much more invasive ways than they originally said they would. It says, who cares if the government knows where you are every second of the day? If it's easy to buy gum without a credit card, that's great until they decide you're the bad guy.
You're taking me to Harrogate in the middle of the night over a tweet.
Which is happening in the UK all over the place when they silence people for posting things on social media by coming to their house at 2 a.m. and knocking on the door to talk to them about their social media posts, when they are arresting people to put in social media posters into jails. Because that is what is going on. I hate to say it, but we're really right back where we were 300 years ago with some of this stuff in terms of the government censorship and control over people. But this is a whole new level of control with having this much data. It's really insane that we're even about to consider walking into this as a human race at this time. And so there's all these articles. You can find them everywhere about how this is a danger. And by the way, part of the PSYOP is saying, well, they're already spying on you. They already have all your information. So why does it matter? Well, obviously not, because if that was just the case, they wouldn't need to do this, right? So that's part of the PSYOP. Is there's a lot of bots online right now, especially on social media platforms, that have been programmed to try and extol the virtues of this agenda to you and make it appear as though there's widespread public approval. These bot comments are usually posted at the top, underneath government posts and what have you. And they're literally AI that's been programmed to try to train and program you to accept this agenda. Obviously, this wouldn't need to be taken to this level if they already had what they needed. So the idea that they've already got everything and we should just go along with it is ridiculous. But a lot of people don't realize that when they're on the internet now, they're most likely interacting with AI every single day. But that is what's happening. So if you don't have the government having all your information in one place being scary enough, considering how authoritarian these governments have become, then you also have all of this hacking potential. And this is sensitive data. It's all the stuff about you. And if you haven't seen it and you don't know this, we live in a world where world leaders are now having a designated person who carries around their poop suitcase. Okay? That's the level we're at. There's a man whose whole job, well, maybe it's not his whole job. He's probably got other stuff to do. I mean, I can't imagine his whole job is just carrying around Putin's doo-doo all the time in a suitcase that's handcuffed to his wrist. But that's a thing now, because apparently your biological material is so valuable with this technology, they can basically decode you and use that against you in ways that are very frightening.
But once you can probabilistically and through modeling be able to much better see what's going to happen. Take, for example, the fact that we already can start to see signs of Alzheimer's many decades potentially before a person starts to manifest the condition. Do they want to know? And if they don't want to know, should other people have the ability to know? Should an insurance company be able to make choices about whether to cover them? Should an employer have access to that information to make decisions about whether or not they are somebody that they ought to employ?
So there you have doo-doo suitcase guys. That's what they do. They just walk around with a doo-doo suitcase handcuffed to their wrists and make sure no one else gets access to the doo-doo. Can you imagine if that was your job just for a second? I mean, you just you get up every day, get dressed, look yourself in the mirror, and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go carry that doo-doo. Whatever. It's 2025. We're all carrying doo-doo, right? Anyway.
Recent leaks and media coverage may have given you the impression that ID cards are about to be dumped. I'm afraid nothing could be further from the truth. Inside Parliament, in a battle that's taken so far almost 2 years, a general election, and now 3 Home Secretaries, the government have managed to force through a piece of legislation that is not only their widest attack on civil liberties to date, but that represents a fundamental shift of power between the citizen and the state. The people inside here are not our masters. They are public servants, accountable to all of us. Something that this government seems to have forgotten in its pursuit of its ever more authoritarian agenda. Even during the course of No to ID's battle, they've made it illegal for people to protest outside Parliament. Something that people have had the right to do for many hundreds of years.
And in case you didn't know, Tony Blair was trying to get this put in the UK years and years ago. And it was not popular. This was not popular. And it actually ended up falling apart. And he's come out now, of course, once again on the scene to say how great this is going to be for everyone.
We can ensure that digital ID enhances rather than threatens personal privacy. The key is building trust.
To have this Cthulhu of the void feasting on everyone in some surveillance nightmare. Here's just one example of how this could be used coming from his own Institute for Global Change. Because as you all know, if we're going to have global change, we definitely want Tony Blair on that. Anyway, it shows right here that there's a keep your community clean and safe area to report issues. And one of those issues has to do with noise complaints, vandalism, etc. So you could turn your neighbors in for all these things, right? And then at the bottom, you get a community impact score for how many reports you've made, issues you've fixed. I'm doing derisive air quotes. I mean, you're getting scored on how many times you're turning in reports here. They're gamifying, basically turning your neighbors into informants like it's some kind of Stasi level, but with a gamification layer added. That's what this looks like. I mean, come on.
For vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure.
You can only see this in a good light if you're trying as hard as you can to ignore the reality of what world we actually live in right now.
And the shameful thing is that the people who created the war are still being given awards, are still making huge amounts of money, and in the case of Tony Blair, is still being invited onto the BBC to give his views on absolutely everything, instead of being in the dock at The Hague, which is where I think most people in Britain would like him to be.
When they create an illegal migrant problem, they facilitate those people into our country and then tell us that the only solution is for us to all give up our freedoms and have a digital ID.
So this is what they did. They're doing the you break it, you buy it strategy of just opening the borders, letting in everyone, pissing everyone off, and then going, oh no, look what we did. We spilled the milk. We're going to have to pick that up. And here's how we're going to do it in a way that sucks for you all. That's right, because we need more control. We obviously didn't have enough when we completely caused this entire situation so that we would have a problem that we could then justify the solution after getting you all to react to. Problem, reaction, solution, absolutely. And that's what this obviously is. And so they tried to do this, but it was ultimately scrapped under Tony Blair's coalition government back in the day. And make us all behave. So it's retract from the cradle to the grave. Deeply unpopular. No one wanted to do it. I can't imagine why he's even coming out showing his face again. If they actually want to get this through without pissing everyone off, he should probably go somewhere for a while and just chill out of sight. Because nobody wants to think about anything this man tries to come do.
The key is building trust.
Who even wants to hear? It's like he's such a rat of a man. Anyways, the fact that having all of this stuff in one centralized location and in the hands of a untrustworthy authoritarian government that's trying to set up a pre-crime surveillance state, the likes of which Philip K. Dick wrote about back in the day, the fact that that's happening should be enough for everyone. It really should. But it's not really why this is so. If this was just it and that was just it, that would still not be great. But we know that there are plans for further control.
From October 12th, those entering Europe on a non-EU visa will have to register their biometric data.
And behavior modification. We absolutely know it because they tell us all the time.
One ubiquitous type of ID, and certainly that it was digital, and certainly that it was biometric. And we really work with all our partners to actually help that being to grow this. And the interesting part of it is that, yes, it is very necessary for financial services, but not only. Sure. It's also good for school enrollment, it's also good for health, who actually got a vaccination or not. It's very good to get your subsidies, from the government.
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
There's no realistic solution to the climate transition that does not involve a globally coordinated system of carbon taxes.
I had a discussion
some months ago with the mayor of Los Angeles, who told me in 2030 Los Angeles will be private car-driven free.
We should be taking into account the impact of our flying on the planet now, and that's
pushing up the tax on flying.
You push up the tax on flying, you push up the cost on transport, and that's in part what putting a price on carbon is.
Particularly animal agriculture is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, a major driver of climate change. So one thing people can do to help, in this case, is to eat less meat.
But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. But so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat.
Somebody from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization sent me this report. This came out in 2013. Nobody ever reads these things. But he said, this is important, you have to read this. So I read it and ended up writing an article about it. It was published in May of 2016. UN let them eat bugs. The report was about how they're going to make us eat bugs, how meat and chicken and traditional agriculture were not sustainable, and the food of the future was going to have to be creepy crawlers. And they actually have a big section in the report about, those Westerners, they're pretty picky with their food. They're not really going to want to eat bugs. We're going to have a major propaganda campaign.
They're building a system that's going to link to this, and it's going to be able to track, trace, and control everything that you buy.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
Once you have the digital money system, then there's all sorts of services and applications that can be built on top of that.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? Where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
They're going to be able to use that data to put in these systems, and we're already starting to see it. And I don't know if you've seen this going around on X, if you're on X at all, but they've been sharing this picture of a Rainer's sandwich. The packaging has a carbon score up at the top, and people are debating whether or not this is real. It's a package for a sandwich that says, eating this uses 8.1% of your daily dietary carbon allowance. Now, what? Where are they getting this 8.1%? Why is it 8.1% and not 8%? What is this? What is your daily dietary carbon allowance anyway? Is that even a thing? Well, I don't know if this particular picture is real, but what I do know is that this company is absolutely involved in that. They've been part of a project to try and get this kind of measurement going. They're using a real-time data processing thing with dedicated AI via a gamified interface to figure out these percentages and to try to put this on, okay? And there's a whole article you can read, foodmanufacture.co.uk, and it talks about the problem with carbon labeling and its solution. It has these two guys that are working on the Rainer Foods model. It's part of the Innovate UK funded project. It's like they've gotten $2.5 million to do this, and they're measuring CO2 and monitoring it across the entire chain so they could try to give a percentage here on this. It's dynamic CO2e monitoring, which allows Rainer Foods to report the embedded carbon per delivery consignment to a wholesale customer, and by the end of the project, print a bespoke dynamic carbon data percentage on every product. And so they're down here talking about how they get this number. The carbon emissions required to plant, grow, harvest, and process the components of this sandwich and then assemble and deliver it. And they total that and display it in grams, and they call that the carbon footprint. Once that's been calculated, they present the result as a percentage of a dietary carbon daily allowance using ONS statistics from the UK, and they compute this. And then they have a color-coded system. And it says here that They're calculating this footprint based on a basket of other comparable lunchtime options. And in parentheses, it says slices, pies, soup, salads, jacket potatoes, rather than just their own products to establish a meaningful basis for comparison. But as you can already see, none of this makes any sense. It doesn't. Some people eat breakfast for lunch. Some people eat all kind of stuff for lunch. They don't just eat lunch items. This isn't real math, okay? That's what I'm saying. It has the flair of authority. But if you actually think about it for 2 seconds, this doesn't make sense. But this is the thing. We've already been told they want to tie these things to targets about how much meat a person is eating and things like that. Here's just one example. If you haven't heard of this before, it's called C40 Cities. It's a global network of mayors who have signed on to this. Mayors from 96 different major cities across the world, representing 1/12 of the world's population and 1/4 of the global economy. And they have signed on to this action to confront the climate crisis. And they put out this report back in June of 2019 called The Future of Urban Consumption in a 1.5 degrees Celsius World. And in it, they have targets that we're supposed to reach. And they call these targets interventions to intervene and change our consumption to fight climate change. And I just want to show you a few of them real quick. I'm pretty sure I've shown you guys this before in another video, but as we've covered this topic so extensively in the last decade, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it bears repeating anyway. Because if you're new to this, you haven't seen this in a while, you still need to see it because now all this stuff is coming together, right? All the things that before we were talking about in different various videos, this is all starting to come together. It's all starting to be like one big thing. And you can actually really start to see how this could play out, how it could be implemented. So for food, the progressive target by 2030 is 16 kilograms of meat per person per year. But the ambitious target is 0. Nobody eating meat. That's the target. Progressive target, 90 kilograms of dairy consumption. Ambitious target, 0. So they don't want people eating meat or dairy. If you scroll down, they also have interventions for clothing. Progressive target for clothing in 2030 is you can only buy 8 new clothing items per year. And it's unclear here of whether or not that counts like a pack of underwear since that's multiple pieces in one package. But I mean, this is the level these people have thought of controlling everyone else. This is the level we're at. The ambitious target is you only get to buy 3 new clothing items a year. That's it for you. Private transportation. Progressive target in 2030, 190 vehicles per 1,000 people. But the ambitious target is 0 private vehicles. Nobody gets to own their own private car. Nobody. Aviation. Progressive target in 2030, 1 short-haul return flight that's less than 1,500 kilometers every 2 years per person. Ambitious target, you only get to go one place every 3 years. So you don't get to go anywhere.
People of means who are going to travel, and then there's going to be people maybe who of lesser means who might actually be able to use an Oculus or a Magic Leap or some other kind of device to travel to the same place, but from their own couch.
I mean, this is what we're talking about here. And how could they implement that? Well,
this specific brand, even the specific batch of this, if we link that with, AI technology and then big data and particularly Internet of Things, there are ways for us to come up with instant measurement and reporting of the carbon footprint. I hope that through this we can help people to really make different choices.
We've already heard speakers at WEF back in 2022, for example. We had Alibaba Group President J. Michael Evans telling everyone how they're in the development of an individual carbon footprint tracker.
Individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
The year before that, we had articles coming out in the New Scientist and The Independent. Should everyone have their own personal carbon budget? They've been trying to push this idea, right? Smack dab in the middle of COVID, they started trying to push this idea. They were like, oh, look, the lockdowns are so good for the environment. Remember that? Remember that talking point? Well, that's what this is. It fed right into this. It's all part of the same thing. Because once they get a digital ID and centralize all of that stuff, I mean, you've already probably seen this in your bank account. They're already separating out things that you buy by where you bought them. Like, oh, this is grocery, this is my light bill, whatever. They're already doing that. They're going to be able to do these percentages. It's not going to be based on anything that's actually legit. I mean, there truly is no daily carbon. That's not actually a thing. I'm sure they can come up with something. I'm sure they'll never really be able to explain what it's based on in a way that'll make any sense to anyone. There is no officially mandated dietary daily carbon allowance in the UK, but they're estimating reasonable targets, whatever. But it'll control, like the whole idea is control at the end of the day. You want to know how predictable this is? This is so freaking predictable that while I'm sitting here trying to edit this video, somebody just got done posting their carbon footprint score from their NatWest app. And it shows you exactly how these banks are going to be doing this. Your bills cost this much CO2. Like, your bills are already bills that you pay, but they're going to assign a CO2 score to it now. So your bills, just the fact that you have bills is also going to be a new bill. It's like a tax on taxes, okay? Eating out 41 kilograms of carbon, shopping 25 transactions, 327 kilograms of carbon. They're just going to add a new tax that they came up with on everything that you already pay for, that you're already taxed on. It's a tax on top of a tax.
Basically, the coffee that we all drink emits between 15 and 20 tons of CO2 per ton of coffee.
We already know that the people who are financially benefiting at the top off of this don't give two shits about this. They're flying private jets around so they can lecture us all about how bad our carbon is, eating whatever they want and giggling gleefully to themselves that they duped a bunch of carbon-based life forms into believing that carbon is the problem. Okay? That's what they're doing. And it really is all about making you feel guilt and shame for existing, just by the way. And in case you weren't sure, they give you a little estimated footprint for the month with an informational bubble that says, your carbon for the month of September is like flying from London to Kuala Lumpur, which you can't even afford to do because you're just trying to survive and exist. Meanwhile, these leeches are like, here's a new tax for your taxes. You want to pay some tax on your taxes? How about another tax? This is yet again a bunch of emotionally manipulative hypocrites who stand to financially benefit from feasting off of everyone else like parasites that are using shame and guilt to demoralize us and push humanity into yet another phony control system based on their version of what's really going on here, their earth-based religion, which you have to have faith in because you have to trust that these numbers mean jack all and that they're actually based in any kind of consequential reality whatsoever. And not just the financial consequences that they've dreamed up in the dystopian nightmares they want to force us all into. Gee, where have we heard that before? Could it be literally all of human history? I'm so sick and tired of these energy vampires sucking off humanity, man.
The current pandemic has brought unimaginable devastation to people's lives, livelihoods, and national economies. At the same time, the green recovery represents an unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset the ways in which we live and do business.
If you have a digital ID, you can do things like this.
Can I get another pint, please?
Sorry, sir. Your Brit card says you've exceeded your alcohol quota for this week.
Sorry, sir, your Brit card says you've already flown twice this year. We're having to restrict passengers with higher than average emissions profiles.
Sorry, I'm afraid your funds have been temporarily frozen. Your recent social media post did not align with the government's narrative.
Sorry, I'm afraid your Brit card says you cannot purchase any more meat this week as part of our commitment to achieving net zero.
That's the problem. See, this is where we go. Do you want the government telling you how many sandwiches you can have for lunch today? What if you're buying, just by the way, I'm like curious, what if you're buying sandwiches for a party? They're trying to conform human behavior to computers, and we're not computers. People make weird random decisions all the time just because they feel like it, because we have emotions. Computers don't have those. But at the very least, this is some fuzzy math. And by the way, your carbon footprint, I just found this out. I just wanted to throw it in because I found it out. Did you know that whole carbon footprint tracker thing was actually a 2004 propaganda campaign by none other than British Petroleum? That's right, BP, the Deepwater Horizon people. They're the ones who popularized the term carbon footprint in 2004 as a PR move.
Our crudest forms of energy production is now greenwashed in environmental views you can't help but love. Giving you a general positive feeling about the environment and our corporation is one of our most important propaganda messages, because we care what you think.
And they even made a PR thing where they went out into London and they asked people, they put a microphone in their face and they said, hey, what's your carbon footprint?
What size is your carbon footprint?
The carbon footprint, that I don't know.
How much carbon I produce. Is that it?
You mean the effect that my living has on the earth?
And they really went out of their way to push this idea that it's you personally. You're the one. If you just changed all of your behavior and your neighbor just changed all of their behavior, then the whole world would be better. Coming from BP, which I don't know if you're aware, but this is from a report called Carbon Majors, the Carbon Majors database. This is a 2024 report, and I just want to show you for just a second, just so you could see for yourself. BP is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the world for major emissions. So let me ask, does BP have a vested interest in promoting the idea that it's individuals like you that are causing the whole problem? And if you just stopped eating and farting and breathing, the world would be better? Even though they're literally 8th in the world for the top 20 carbon major entities by emissions from 1854 to 2022, 8th in the world for that entire time period in emissions. It's laughably a joke, but they did. I found it on the Wayback Machine. They're telling everyone, come calculate your carbon footprint. It's time for you to go on a low carbon diet. Deepwater Horizon, I just want to say it again. Anyways, the thing is that once they get a digital ID system in there, they have all this data in one place, then they can start bringing in these further systems of control.
My chief concern, if you look at what AI is good at, AI is very good at simulating anything that can be expressed mathematically. And of course, the thing we all know can be expressed mathematically are our financial transactions. And the reality is, if I can track you closely where you're going and what you're doing, and I can get you on programmable money, which can be turned on and off, then I can start to use AI and surveillance systems and algorithms to basically manage and control your behavior.
While we're watching this unfold in the UK, my fellow Americans, please recognize that this is something they've been trying to do here as well for a very long time. This is all, and I'm not just talking about total information awareness. Everybody knows about the DARPA total information awareness with the all-seeing eye pyramid. Like, they came right out the gate. We'll see if we can just get it through with as blatant a move as possible. No, that's not going to work. Okay, we'll bring it in under the guise of a bunch of private corporations, and then people will accept it that way. But actually, this goes back many decades. They've been trying to figure out how to do this. It wasn't that long ago that we were fighting this off. I actually found out that during the Johnson administration, they started trying to push this kind of centralized government data thing here in America. And it was soundly rejected by everyone, politicians on both sides of the aisle. The ACLU came out to sound the alarm. They had professors and people in congressional testimony talking about why this was such a bad idea. How this was just going to be Big Brother. I think if you look up in newspaper archives, the phrase Big Brother is watching you, if you look that stuff up, it's everywhere, everywhere. Everybody seemed to know and recognize the danger of this, and that it was an asinine level of control to hand this over. The thing is that we actually don't have to, but that's the level we're getting to. We're getting pushed towards having to take a stand for something, having to say no, mass noncompliance, boycott, protest. We're getting pushed towards these things. And if we don't do that, and we all just walk into this controlled grid cage together, then I'm sure the powers that be think, well, that's what you deserve. because you allowed it and you walked right in here and just laid down and took it. And I just wonder how much more of that is going to happen before we wake up one day and we're in every dystopic science fiction nightmare that's been put in a blender. Like, how much more are people going to surrender their sovereignty to these systems? Because it can get so much worse, and it's already bad, but it can get so much worse than this.
So I lived overseas. If you go to Shenzhen, back in 2017, they already had facial recognition cameras there. So if you jaywalked in Shenzhen, they would immediately detect that and send you a notification, and they would deduct money from your what they call WeChat account. They use two main apps, WeChat and Alipay. So you can actually deduct your money directly from your account. This is 4 years ago, so this is not like some sort of conspiracy theory. It's not something that's going to happen 10 years into the future. This happened pre-corona in China.
And that's before you get into the point that if you thought a two-tier justice system was bad, what do you think it's going to be like when it's rules for thee and not for me, having to do with elites and super wealthy people not having to do any of this at all? Because it won't apply to them, and I think we already all know that. I mean, come on, okay? Putting a fine on something just means it's legal for a price, and if you can afford to pay that fine, then you're out, you're good.
So let me get this straight. They're rolling out digital ID even when people don't want it? In the UK, over 2 million people said, no, we don't want it. The government's response? We're going to do it anyway.
People in the UK, almost 3 million people, in a very short amount of time, signed a petition saying they don't want this. And the government responded with, basically, get bent. We don't care what you want. We're not going to redress your grievances. They just straight said, we are doing this. This is not up for debate. You're not even allowed, as the person living under this system, to have that be redressed with the government, because they're just going to tell you what you're going to do. And it just reminds me of another time in history where grievances were not being redressed. Didn't really end well for the British government then. Not sure how it's going to go this time, but they're making it pretty clear they're not listening to anything that any of you have to say on this. They don't care. If you like it or not, they're doing it anyway. They're going to get right all up in your business for your convenience, whether you like it or not. And they've already said, your petition means nothing. Once again, the CBDC program, that whole entire program, is tied in with this digital ID. And now the Bank of England has upheld its refusal to release documents that show the links between the central bank digital currency system and the digital ID they're trying to bring in. It says an internal review signed off on by the bank's deputy secretary, Michael Salib, concluded that disclosure would have a, quote, chilling effect, end quote. Disclosing this information could lead to a successful breach of confidence claim against the bank. Although I would say probably not that many people all that confident in it now. The issuance of a CBDC and digital identity framework remains a live and sensitive area of policymaking, it says, and that disclosure at this stage could inhibit the free and frank exchange of views essential for robust policymaking and may lead to destabilizing speculation or confusion in the market and the public. So they're not going to release these documents that show the connection between these two things, but you really don't need to see the documents. It's extremely obvious. And the entire foundation for getting this system going to where you can track and trace these kinds of things and try to implement conditions on everything would be through a digital ID system. That's a foundation that is needed to build out this entire control grid.
You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
That's just at the low end of what can be done with this. That's before you get to a movie like Sandra Bullock's The Net. You step outside the lines of whatever regime is in charge. You had wrongthink or whatever they want. Literally, you're deauthorized. Your access to everything is just shut off. They'll get everybody tap dancing to literally whatever tune they want.
Right, imagine what they'll do is they'll introduce this digital ID and they're like, it's going to be good migration, it's going to be helpful, convenient, it's going to be convenient and safe. Then there'll be some sort of crisis like a pandemic or a war or whatever. They go, right, unless you've got the digital ID card, you can't access these resources or attend these facilities or whatever it'll be. And then it would never go back to normal. Same as it never quite went back to normal after 9/11, never quite went back to normal after COVID, never quite went back to normal after 2008. They slowly escalate the tensions, legitimize the authority until you don't notice that you're not free anymore.
I watched the movie In Time recently. While I get that we don't live in a world where everything is paid out literally by a clock on our arm, that's what this system turns into at its ultimate conclusion. This system turns into a level of control that makes now seem like pure freedom. And a lot of people would say now is very oppressive and financially constraining, but now will look like pure freedom by comparison to what this system could become. Why give this level of power and control over yourself to these corrupt entities that have shown nothing but contempt for humanity for such a very, very long time? I don't even understand why anybody would think this is going to be fine or good. If the potential is there for what could happen with this, it's a no. It should be no. It should be soundly rejected. It should be soundly rejected by everyone. There should be mass non-compliance. I mean, they don't have to literally turn people into cyborgs and chip them. You guys know that, right? They just have to use these systems and get inside your head. They could just control you remotely with data. This is where it goes. It goes to a place like the movie In Time, where you get up in the morning and the first thing you're going to be thinking about your allowance for the day on these things that can be controlled. What's my allotted percentage of allowed whatever? Because that's going to rule your whole life. It's going to rule what you eat for breakfast. Your first decisions of the day will be governed by it, and then your rest of your entire day will be as well. So you will become basically a robot programmed by this system and controlled by it. That's how that ends. That's the only way it can end, because these systems require more and more and more data and more control to justify their existence. They feast off of it. That's what they eat. So at the end of the day, you become a robot programmed by governments and central banks and corporations. I mean, that's essentially what it is, in a much more direct way than we have ever seen. Well, in order to get into the smart car, you have to match your phone up. Actually, there's two ways you can do it. One has to do with your phone, and one has to do with an RFID card they give you, and the card unlocks the car. You have to hold your tracker card up to the car. And that's how you get it to work. And so the guy was holding his phone up to the car to try and get the car to let him in, and it looked like the car wouldn't let him in.
He's been there for several minutes. He can't get into this smart car. He's calling somebody because he can't get into this damn car.
You could say that's how it is now, but that is nothing compared to what this could become. Nothing. Not even. So that's the ultimate conclusion that it comes out to. Mass behavior modification, mass control of your life, of you. This is like putting yourself inside the Truman Show and then engineering your mind to a point that you'll never be able to even think your way out of it.
I'd like to be an explorer, like the Great Magellan.
Oh, well, you're too late. There's really nothing left to explore.
So you would never even come to the idea of getting in a boat and trying to find the wall. You wouldn't even be able to conceive of it.
Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented.
And that's what this feels like. It feels like putting people into a control system that they will not be able to ever think their way out of. The whole thing feels like it's a matrix with a labyrinth inside, and it's designed for you to never be able to escape. That will generate generations of beings that can never escape it. Ever. I'm somebody that came from poverty when I was little. I have been witnessing for my whole life how money has been used to control everyone, and people will think of it before they will think of their own health, the well-being and safety of their children, everything, because it controls everything. But this system is, this is diabolical, and I mean that in a very straightforward way. What kind of demons came up with this? I really want to know. Like, what kind of actual demons walking around in human skin suits came up with this? Nobody should want to live in a world like this. we've seen people go along with a lot of things up until now, but this is like the hill. This is the line in the sand. This is the place where you say, I am not going into that box. This has got to be where you say, I'm not going into that cage. I'm not going to do it. You will not recognize yourself on the other side of this, the thing that you will become under this kind of control, by a system that's trying to make itself omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. And I just don't know why anyone would want to give themselves so fully to such an evil system. And I'm not mincing any of these words. I mean them all, exactly what I'm saying.
They are putting in place all of these technological mechanisms for control we've never seen before. It's been the ambition of every totalitarian state from the beginning of mankind to control every aspect of behavior, of conduct, of thought, and to obliterate dissent.
In some ways, I'm wondering what we've learned from history. I mean, COVID showed me that there are people who absolutely will go along with anything they're told to do if they're made scared enough. But at some level, you're just going to live in fear in a control system. That's not really living, especially once it becomes really, really over the line where you don't even get to make your own decisions anymore, really, because it's all within this ever narrowing window of possibility. It's like they put a digital control grid over the already control, like the matrix we already had. They put a new digital layer on top of that. It's even more control. At what level do we say that this is actually impeding life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Because it will. It will. No matter what slick guy in a suit trying to extol the virtues of how this is going to be good. I mean, look at the world around you. Has any of this been good? When is the last time anything was good? Ye shall know them by their fruits, okay? Not what they're saying. What is the outcome? What is actually being done? Look around at the world itself. It's eating and destroying people. These systems, they're so corrupt, they are to the point of cannibalism on the very beings that they were created to serve. That's the level. Giving more power through technology to those systems is not the answer.
So what we're talking about doing is building a system that will allow you to be surveillance and tracked and turn your money on and off, or incentivize you or penalize you in a variety of ways with your money that can be integrated with your behavior.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors.
It's going to come to a point where people are going to have to say no. Actually have to. And everyone who's been sitting around going, I just want to be left alone. Well, guess what? I hate to tell you this. I really do. Don't shoot the messenger, but they're not leaving any of us alone. And that has been made extremely clear in the last 5 years. We're not getting left alone. No one is getting left alone. They just start shutting down people's bank accounts in Vietnam because they wouldn't biometrically authenticate them. Anyone who refused got their bank account taken away. So they're not leaving anyone alone. And at some level, as we just keep progressing down this very authoritarian, technocratic, panopticon surveillance state, pre-crime minority report, insert 50,000 sci-fi films here, there's got to be a limit where people get together and say, we don't want to live like digital slaves.
Did you know the EU plans to launch its digital currency, the digital euro, in October 2025?
The deadline for us is going to be October of 25.
Some say the centralized bank digital currency, or CBDC, would be a great way to let Europeans pay more easily across borders. Others say, hey, haven't we been paying with bank digital currency for decades? I vaguely remember using my digital bank card to order a taco blanket on Amazon while smashed on edibles last night. Why is this different? Well, it's the C. And the C word here is a big C means centralized, which is code for you getting The power will be with the European Central Bank. They are not elected by anyone, and they have as much control over your wallet as your average Berlin dominatrix has over most of her clients' testicles.
I'm tired. I am sick and tired of fighting these bastards. I don't want to fight. I wasn't put on this planet to fight, but fight we must. Because otherwise they're going to bring in a digital ID, and once that's in a digital currency, we will have total surveillance over everything that we do and we say.
You're creating the problem to offer the solution. Order out of chaos, they call it, don't they? Well, this is an open video for you. F*** you, Keir Starmer. I'm never going to engage with your digital ID. You can stick it up your ass.
Luckily, a similar system has been tested in China, and they are very happy with the amount of control it has given them over their slaves.
That is what we are quickly devolving into. Straight up. And it needs to be thrown into the fires of Mount Doom, okay? I don't know what else to say.
This is the sort of technology that we see in all these dystopian sort of films and whatever. And people keep putting it off and thinking that this is something that's going to happen later in my kid's lifetime or my grandkids. It's already here. And if this gets implemented anywhere, especially in a Western nation, it's not going away.
I feel like I've seen enough science fiction and read enough dystopic literature to last me a lifetime of warnings about why this is no good. It's interesting, I'll just leave it here, but Philip K. Dick, in the years leading up to his death, his untimely death, he was writing about how he felt like some of his work was already starting to come true. And he started to wonder if he was not writing fiction, but actually writing about the future before it has happened.
It seems to me that in many ways, ideas have a life of their own. They appear to seize on people and make use of them. The idea which seized me 27 years ago and never let go of me is this. Any society in which people meddle in other people's business is not a good society, and a state in which the government, quote, knows more about you than you know about yourself, as it is expressed in my novel Flow My Tears, the Policeman said, is a state which must be overthrown.
Overthrown. That is what he said. People want to act like this is just a bad dream, but notice that we're to the point that when you wake up in the morning, it's still going on. So the nightmare is still here. We're going to have to face it, and we're going to have to stand up for our sovereignty and our rights and our privacy, even if it's inconvenient. Because convenience is what's been used to suck us all into this, and it's not really that convenient when you basically give power and control over your entire existence to an untrustworthy, lying, corrupt authoritarian system. Everybody who's involved in this is either making money off of it or getting power out of it. So those aren't people who have any of the rest of us, our best interests in mind. I don't even believe them when they say this is for the earth. I think that's all just some greenwashed nonsense. And they've gotten a lot of adults to believe in a lot of nonsense. But that nonsense is about to get used to put in one of the most controlling systems that modern humanity has ever deigned to dream up. And if more of us don't start waking up from this nightmare, we're going to get trapped in it. And I don't know about you, but I'm not doing it. And I hope more people won't. There's more of us than there are of them, and somebody's got to start saying no.
How are you going to control the many when you are few? The way you're going to do it was with programmable money, but programmable money doesn't click in and work well unless you've got everybody on the grid. You need to be able to track them. You need to be able to watch their behavior. You need to be able to influence their behavior. And then you've got complete control. And that is not just wearables. That is not just an internet of bodies. That is a coup d'etat. That is the end of human liberty in the West.
Imagine how much harder it will be for your children, for your grandchildren, to express dissent, to even an alternative opinion if they're being tracked and monitored by the authorities throughout their lives. We're not just fighting for an abstract principle here. We're fighting for freedom. Freedoms which were hard won, which we've had for so many years now that many seem to have forgotten that they've got them in the first place.
For me, it's a slippery slope down a route of authoritarianism, governmental overreach, where the state is intervening in our lives too much.
I'm never going to do your digital ID, and I would urge everyone to take the same stand, because if you don't, this globalist communist scumbag is going to destroy your lives with digital ID, the digital currency that follows, and a digital prison. I think that's pretty obvious.
This is the time to stand up. This is the hill that we must all die on. This is our freedom that we have to fight for our children and our grandchildren and all of those that come behind us. Stand up, everybody. No digital ID.
My identity is mine. I decide who I trust with my most personal or private information. I'm a responsible, law-abiding, tax-paying British citizen who doesn't need the government controlling and sharing my personal data, monitoring my every move or transaction, or telling me who I am.
I've no wish to be treated like a suspect all the time. So take your card and stick it where the sun will never shine.
We cannot walk into this cage. I love you guys, but mass non-compliance.
I would like to solve the puzzle. I would like to solve the puzzle. I would like to solve the puzzle. I would like to solve the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. The title of the show today is Blind to Tyranny, Why? So this is a question I've been asking myself probably for years, but especially lately. And I introduced this question to our locals community this week, and I got some amazing answers. So that's the direction of the video today. I'd like to share those answers with you. So one of the more recent observations I've made, I've been a university and college professor for just short of 25 years. And a general pattern I've noticed, because I'll maybe discuss this a bit in this video, but you know, a theme in political science is the concept of tyranny and methods to safeguard tyranny and the very concept of tyranny itself. So I have taught this over the years, and an interesting conversation, an interesting idea hit me the other day is when I thought of the trajectory of me talking about that in terms of the Constitution or in terms of political theology. I've noticed that people shut down more and more and more to the extent that tyranny is more in our face than ever before. And so, for example, this week I'm teaching about it, or the last few weeks, about the initial safeguards and the concepts, and I'll introduce ideas to students like Palantir or hate speech. And it's another level of shutting down. And it's as if the more we're actually confronted with it, the more people are shutting down. And to some extent, maybe that's something that simply could be explained through psychology as a coping mechanism. And what I did throughout the week in our 3 shows that we have, I'll give us an overview of those shows and some of the highlights from Metaverse Monday, Connect the Dots Wednesday, and Memory Hold Fridays. But that was the overarching theme of the show. And I was going to hit it from all different angles, philosophically, theologically, psychologically, in terms of political science, in terms of anecdotal observations. But it was a question that I wanted to attack for the week and have all of the information from our locals community, from our previous episodes, feed into this idea. And as usual, I have just amazing responses from our community that hit it from even additional elements that we couldn't possibly even begin to explore this week. So we start here with the question itself. And I can't even tap into all the directions we're getting tyranny, but I think the most obvious one is the whole oligarch bro, Palantir, Altman, in your face. We're going to strap you into this surveillance system. The whole world's going to be involved in it. You have no say. We're going to be overcome with AI. You have to merge with it. And again, the more I tell students about this, and I know they have futures, they're trying to move themselves into brighter futures. I understand, but it's a new level of shutting down compared to the conversations I would have 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And so I wanted to think through that dynamic and just ask this question in terms of scripture, in particular, the Great Deception. So the bros are getting pretty in your face. The psyops are getting pretty in your face. And as I've mentioned before, there's a number of even occult explanations for this if we don't push back on the obvious psyops, on the lone gun shooter once again. And the backstories seem to get flimsier and flimsier. And perhaps part of the reason is if people do not push back, there is the Hoffman concept that you're further enrolled in the psyop yourself. Your consent, tacit consent, leads to your own abule, apathy and amnesia, and you lose the capacity to defend yourself. So certainly that's a great occult explanation to get started with this that we have hit before in the last previous few videos. So let me go over some of the highlights. Again, for our locals community, it's hotter than ever. It's just a joy to be over there and be involved in these people. And you're going to see I can only even hit it part of the response to this video this week. And I'll give you just some of the highlights of that. But we do the 3 shows. Links are in the description. We started out this week with Metaverse Monday. And the thought from this week coming off of the metaverse was the idea of the Gnostic thought virus. And we explored that from the ground up, and the idea that this is a perennial concept in Christianity that starts within the pages of scripture and is rolling out today. And it's a shapeshifter. It's a parasite that mimics Christianity. It tries to be like the city of God, but it operates always in disguise, pulling people from one paradigm to another. So to the extent that some have said that modern Christianity is almost in toto Gnostic Christianity. So we went into that concept, and it's going to be big going forward. We're really going to go heavily into Gnosticism and its history, how the Catholic Church fought it over and over and over throughout the centuries, and the many faces of it and how it appears today. And we went through even some contemporary Catholic sources that see it rears its head in the woke movement, or the idea that I'm a man born in a woman's body. But I would argue that it exists both in its communist form and its dialectic opposite, which is its Zionistic form. So it's going to capture you in all of these promises of man that want to pull you down, take that beatific vision and put it down into the earthly means. And it's a perennial project. And so we began the week with that idea of the Gnostic thought virus. And we wanted to say some of the idea, like we saw the notion over the last 5 years when we looked deeper into the sources last week of what is mass formation psychology, as they're calling it this day, mass delusion. We traced it throughout major periods in the ancient world, in the Middle Ages, and currently the things that we've been able to observe and measure over the last few years. And we're going to continue to do that idea of the very virus itself that was presented to us as a type of trigger, as a type of sigil to get us involved in the creation of this second reality, this egregore. that's operating within the, you guessed it, the spectacle. So we want to detangle that in order to always, our goal here is to recognize that we're in an ontological war over reality, and we want to get ourselves back to base reality. And that was very much something we worked with throughout this week and up until our great conversation we had with the guys today. One of the big things that I really wanted to focus in with our community is this idea that I'm repeating over and over again with my upcoming book, should be released in, I'm debating if I want to release it before Christmas, but I'm really happy with it so far. But this is a big idea that I think the saints wrestled with, the great saints wrestled with throughout the age. What is this great deception? What are the conditions? What are the signs that we're approaching it or that we're in this great deception, where God gives us over to an operation of air because we do not love the truth? So why do we not love the truth? What is it? How do we, should we explore this just only through theology, or should we use our other kind of avenues of information to kind of fully understand why people are just not? And I'll just stop right here. And I made a video last week about our Catholics, left wing, right wing, whatever you want to call us, in the spectacle. And to me, the biggest indicator that there's a problem, I believe that we've been sent this event, genocide in the Middle East, to see if we're going to respond to this. If you don't respond to this, and I could put a picture up before us right now with an aerial shot of Gaza, it's wiped off the map. Where Jesus used to dwell has been leveled out. And I think that is part of the program. And I could play you this series of rabbis over and over and over saying, kill Amalek. Amalek is Rome. Amalek is Europe. Amalek is America. We must kill America. And then flash cuts over to Americans. We have to be giving them more money. You said something bad about them. We're going to deport you. And this is insanity. And why are Christians not talking about this? Why are Catholics not talking about this? And I'm going to put it, or I did this week in this bookend, this framing of the great delusion. Is that part of this spectacle? Is this part of this second reality that's being created in preparation for the new age, the great reset? So I want us to think about that idea that we're blind to tyranny because we do not push back. We're given over to a spirit of abule, amnesia, and apathy. And we would rather just go with the flow. We also talked about a little bit of last week, the deeper sources. What does that mean? Alienation, the difference between, are we truly alienated from the ground of being, as Vogelin would suggest, and that's part of the disordered mindset, is we've been disconnected with the classic Christian social order. And so it's hard for us to kind of reorder. And then we're going to speak in a moment about how literally there's been a plan to rewire the mind of the Western brain. So we have so many different explanations of why we're just not responding. The TV doesn't tell us to respond. It's not trendy to respond. You're not going to be a popular YouTuber if you respond to the crisis of our age. I'm talking about the Holy Land crisis that's going to expand with the same program. It's not going to limit itself. So, and that's what we talk about over and over on Memory Hold Fridays from Catholic sources of the age when people truly felt a need to be the church militant. And so, yes, alienation is being pushed on us over and over and over. The idea to alienate yourself from generations, across genders, across geography. Over the last 5 years, get in your house, shut yourself off from everybody else, tune in to the cyber world, tune out from the real world. And so we see it's part of this working out of an agenda to atomatize us and further separate our bodies from our spirits. And I'll go into that in just a moment. But it's this weaponized alienation, not the kind Vogelin speaks about where we're separated from God or from God's order of being, but the kind Marx speaks about. And that's this kind that you're ordered from his, you're alienated from his false reality. So you need to go more into his false reality. And, I'm not going to talk about Marxism at this moment, but it comes in so many guises. You don't have to live in the Soviet Union to be inundated with this message of alienation, alienation, alienation. And so that's part of the, as we say, cosmic conspiracy against God and man and Christ and his church. We touched on this last week, but I just want to be clear. The cosmic conspiracy includes Tikkun Olam. The Pope said he's down with Tikkun Olam. That's a difference. It's an inversion of God redeeming the world, where we participate through the mystical body of Christ, the Catholic social order. All of this, we participate in the redemption of all things. This sneaky way of getting us into the city of man is to call it repairing. And that would be all your green theology, your liberation theology, your LGBT theology, and your Zionist theology. So we get a little Gnostic ourselves when we can see it in others, but we can't see it in ourselves, and we can't see the bigger program that we really need to escape, which I include in the Escaping the Empire of Spectacle. But it's helpful, I would argue, and the great saints, I would argue, to see it in order to get out of it, this disordered kind of way of arranging our worldview. So he said he's down with this. The church is down with it. No pushback from the hierarchy. And I don't see any pushback on this. I guess it's easier to talk about, his statements about abortion, his statements about capital punishment, his statements about sodomites. But these statements about Tikkun that go in the back, the heels of Francis saying this in 2002, and a few others that are working in conjunction with him in Catholic Jewish dialogue, clearly know exactly what they're talking about. This is anti-church lingo. This is linking truth with error, church with anti-church. And the outcome, the logical outcome of Tikkun Olam, the capstone, is Noahide. And that's the capstone of a world in the simulated reality that they're developing for the Jay's Utopia. And it's going to be arranged by and through Noahide laws. And so when you don't clearly see that for what it is, I think this is part of escaping it. You have to see what it is. And I'll be opinionated here. I don't focus on this area too much with my deep state, deep church, but I would suggest the wait and see time is over, but that's just my opinion. Maybe you want to hang on the train a little bit longer. It's kind of like why I said don't vote for Trump. When you give your consent over to these, frankly, it's a demonic ontology, the whole mechanism. It's hard to pull out. It's hard to pull. You can, but it's hard. When you give yourself over to the wait and see, it's that much harder to pull out. Obviously, you still can, but you got to name it, in my opinion. So we talked about that a little bit this week, and then we started up with the question on Wednesday for Connect the Dots. And we played all kinds of videos from even famous people like Joe Rogan saying, whoa, look at the tyranny in England. I mean, people are getting busted right and left for making tweets, for liking a tweet. This is insane, and nobody's talking about it. Why are we blind to the tyranny? Joe Rogan's saying it, right? It's right out there. And, and I'm seeing it in my classes. I'm trying to talk, about the history of free speech. I'm talking about the different mechanisms. And there's more of a shutdown than I've ever heard before, another layer of blindness that I've never seen before. So that's what we were really exploring. And I was doing the regular. It's coming in from the Palantir. It's in your face, the Altmans. We're going to hook you up to this surveillance equipment. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. You don't get to say yes or no. It's coming on like gangbusters. So get ready. And we got it there. We got it with the PSYOPs, threatening the food supply. I mean, every last angle that you could be getting tyranny from, we're getting tyranny from. I mean, even strange things like it's been revealed how much our budget in America has gone to this cause over there, the death and mayhem of other people. People that want to separate themselves. Like, this is a priority of your government. You say, well, I have to vote. I'm Catholic. I need to get involved. Well, why don't you get involved right now and say something about what's going on? It was so easy to do that and tell everybody, well, I'm conservative. I'm going to virtue signal here. Talk about it now. Get Catholic now and say, this is wrong. This is my money. This is somehow attached to this project that's giving all this money for an Antichrist project. Speak up. It's time, I would say. Anyway, sorry. I'd like to say I had some caffeine, but it's been a few hours. But so we brought that up this week. What I think it's important that people kind of snap out of it. I think in the Great Delusion, it said God gave them over to an operation of air so they could not be saved. And that's why I'm stressing right here. It's not, is it your cup of tea to talk about conspiracy? That's wrong questions, wrong framing. Or this week, it's kind of trendy. We kind of can't ignore the Candace Owens story anymore. So we'll put our tippy toe in just enough. So we're going to feel the temperature of the room and then proceed. Just saying. So, I mean, what does AI have to say about this? Blind to tyranny, typed it in there. What do you have to say to us, AI? And AI said to us, it describes a state of people's ignorance or indifference to the oppressive rule of a tyrannical government, often due to internal factors like fear, custom, or unchecked desire for license rather than true freedom. That's like I said, damn, AI, that's good. That's good stuff. I prefer license, freedom, the freedom the world offers me. I would rather hug my comfort than go through the pain of picking up my cross and finding the freedom of Christ in the fullness of his truth. And we've been biopolitically, mimetically programmed our whole life. And we went into that today in our discussion of the behavioral science revolution, that you can't think outside of the cost, benefit, rational choice, pleasure, pain sequence, which is, it sounds good. It sounds like a good way to get along with the world, but it's not Catholic. It's not a path you want to take to the deepest sense of a secure path to salvation, we argued over there. So what else do we have over here? We have some little bumper sticker that says, your blind compliance to tyranny is what will lead to more restrictive government mandates. Just something I pulled off YouTube. Your compliance, including, I would say, your tacit compliance. You're not pushing back. You're going to have radio shows all day long, TV shows, podcasts, and you're going to talk about God and Jesus and this and that and not push back. And you're going to hit the low-hanging fruit and think that somehow you're not going to be leading your audience into the spectacle. How do you come up with that? Because, well, I think that's pretty straightforward. You're blind compliance. That's how it works. People have actually in sociology been studying tyranny for centuries. So this is almost a truism. What do we have up here? Blind trust in tyranny is as dangerous as tyranny itself because it enables those who wish to exploit it. I mean, this is explaining the question pretty well, just right here. Blind to tyranny. Why? People love their comfort. They like the freedom the world offers them over the freedom of Christ, which is something you have to work out with fear and trembling. What does old gatekeeper Noam Chomsky has to say? A society that does not question authority is destined for tyranny. Let me say it one more time. A question that does not question authority is destined for tyranny. And I say to my students over and over, I'm just trying to get you to question authority. And I take it in historical context so it's kind of safe, building up with the framers who talk. And I mean, when I was 19, if I had a professor telling me, I just want you to question authority, I'd say, dang, yeah, cool. I mean, and I was kind of conservative. I mean, it's like they're programmed somehow that is dangerous speech. They kind of like get uncomfortable and start looking down, question authority. Like, I've never heard anybody say something like this. Question authority. Now, we could say God wants us to respect and follow authority, but trusting people that are leading you to hell can get kind of dangerous, right? And the writing is on the wall all around that they're creating an antichrist beast system, and you're going to be strapped into it. I don't want to belabor this right now, but obviously, when you talk about the Bill of Rights, and I said throughout the Anglosphere, you have your equivalent of this. But I talk about my state of freedom over here. I'm able to move around, spin Louis in my pickup truck. Where am I less free? I ask the students. And, eventually, prison. Yes, you're correct. That would be unfree. Nobody wants to be in prison. I said, especially when you hear the door close and the Mexican clip. I said, it's not fun. You don't want to be there. Trust me. And then I get people's attention. And then, so it starts out the free speech, which is being violated every day. Back in the day, they'd say clear and present danger. The court overturned that. You can't just say willy-nilly. You don't like something, say it's going to be clear and present danger. So at the advent of the Vietnam War, and then again with the Patriot Act, they kind of instilled or resurrected this concept of overarching government interest, which is now just in limbo. We have now an idea of prior restraint. And it's basically the idea, we're maybe preparing a war next week, so any freedoms of speech you thought are up in the air. So it's going to be on a come as you will basis. And that's where we're at. Everything's in free fall. Thomas Jefferson said, if the government lives in fear of you, you're in a good spot. If you live in fear of, did I say something that's going to make me lose my job because it was okay last week, but I made a joke about it this week, you're living in fear of the government. This is tyranny. We start out these kind of things with anarchy, no government, probably pretty crazy. We got totalitarianism, heavy hand. Can you all say like a country? And everybody, they know North Korea for some reason. Hitler. Tyranny is when you're moving toward it and you're increasingly being micromanaged. Rights you thought you have are now up in the air. And I said, we're living in it. And I understand, what people don't want to hear this, but people used to 10 years ago really enjoy it. 5 years ago, people were kind of, okay, I see where you're going with it. When I say this is it, there's technology here, it's locked and loaded. And I try not to be like I am right now, too jacked up. And I try to be I've learned over the years, just be very matter of fact. Have you heard the news? Do you do? And like, it's a new level of blindness to this tyranny. And so there are endless explanations. And I got, again, from our community, so many more depthy, interesting explanations. But everything begins with the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, and the freedom of the establishment of a religion or the prohibition thereof. And that's number one. You have what I call the criminal justice systems, where we have the police over here. We have some rights vis-a-vis that. With the court system over here, we get a judge, speedy trial, and then we end up in prison. And we even have some rights in prison. We should not be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. So those are the three legs of or facets of the government system that can put us in a very dark state of tyranny, of unfreedom. So we go through the various states of being less and less free. So, and I said, from every one of these angles, through our culture, through the media, through our politics and economics, they're hitting on all 10 of these. In particular, if you're into American politics, the 10th Amendment, the federal overreach into the states and the cities with things like ICE. And I know people have different opinions, but they're shifting every day to get around the Constitution for each new situation. So even if you're not comfortable with the word tyranny, it's being pushed on constantly. Hate speech legislation, anti-Semitism legislation for the big Tikkun Olam project that our Pope likes to, I guess, wheel out. We have more cries for gun control. We have with the idea of our warrants in the Fourth and into the Fifth Amendment being pressed constantly. And then the whole legal aspect, both in civil and criminal law, are being pushed to the envelope, to the brink. And so we have this going on in so many different ways. So I just wanted to represent that in a measurable way, beyond all the hype and the stories, on the actual criminal justice system and the actual organization of the legal system. We see the words tyranny popping out from each one of the 10 right there at a faster and faster rate. So finally, we got into our conversation today, and it was about a fascinating book I first read 12 years ago called The Leipzig Connection, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But two books or authors that spawned from this were authors such as Charlotte Iserby and John Gatto that talked about the massive, frankly, conspiracy to control the education system in the United States. But what we dealt with in our conversation, it's part of a much larger cosmic conspiracy, but even on the ground, a conspiracy that would include medicine, religion, media, economics, pharmaceuticals, and education. So it's a full spectrum control over the human mind, body, and spirit. But let me just tell you a little bit about the Leipzig connection right now. It begins by William Wundt, and he's considered the father of experimental psychology. And so what he's doing in Germany, there will be connections that are literally traced to people that would be directly fathered in by him, and that they would go out to universities throughout Europe and America and head departments to a person, most famously, probably Dewey, if you're familiar with the Dewey Decimal System. And they would essentially create a socialism situation in American behavioral science that's going to include what we call the social sciences. So it's a new approach to the anthropology of man, but it goes even deeper than that. So essentially, there's a naturalization of man, a despiritualization, a debasement of man to make man a meat puppet, really just a calculator, an animal. So that's in a bigger picture. But this is the modern education system. And I'm sure I'm speaking to a lot of Americans right now that are familiar with policies like No Child Left Behind and Common Core. No teachers like it, left or right. You just keep getting more and more of these federal policies put down on you, more carrot and stick approaches to implementing these, even though the results are never favorable with really anybody. So there's a bigger program at play here. And what is that program we discussed? To think you could take the human being like you could take a rock or an organic object of any kind that exists in nature, break it down to its simple parts, and then reassemble it for use among, frankly, the powers that be that were sponsoring this approach. But this is William Wundt and his first crew over there that would go on and head famous universities all over America. One of the famous ones, some of the first scientists over there at Johns Hopkins, but more famously the Teachers College at Columbia, that would teach other teachers of these new techniques in behavioral science, which would become like the rational choice theory and things like that. So you're looking at the human brain as just a piece of mass, probably about the weight of a pound of custard. And we're going to treat it as such, something that if we can't measure it, if we can't quantify it, if we can't use it to predict, in other words, control, instrumentalize it, it has no purpose. So that is the approach that would really become our modern outlook. And what it's fundamentally an attack on, when I say it's part of a cosmic conspiracy, it's a conspiracy against God and man, Christ and his church. And that would include the mystical body of Christ that created Christian civilization and the Catholic social order, or more broadly, the Christian social order. And that's an understanding of the human being. We say every day, if you do your rosary, you say the Apostles' Creed, and you are always reminded that you have a bodily resurrection. We do not separate in Christian anthropology, Christian theology, and indeed even in Christian ecclesiology and Christian eschatology. It's so important that we are ensouled bodies. We don't have these new age ideas like my body's here and my mind is over here and I'm a female tomorrow and I'm a Eskimo the next day or something to this effect, right? This is Gnostic. That's part of a Gnostic mind virus. And all the Gnostics did from the first century is they never got fundamentally the nature of Christ correct. So either Christ was all spirit and no man, or all man and no spirit, or we're going to return through our consciousness and our bodies as part of this pitiful world. And so without a proper anthropology, you'll put together a disordered world. And so Protestants, the initial ones, were the first people that got those elements correct, the nature of God and the idea that we're ensouled spirits. They can't be separated. The larger project of the Enlightenment was exactly that. In human consciousness, in the minds of men, to separate the spirit and the body. And that was, if you had to say the whole of the Enlightenment project in a few words, it's the separating of the mind and body. And so the behavioral revolution with Wundt is taking it to the next level, to really instill it in all of the disciplines. So what's going on in the modern university is the same thing that we talk about in biopolitics. It's taking this universal understanding of education and how they're connected in the trivium and logic and grammar and how it's all one holistic body, and it's splitting it up into the departments we know at the university. And it's sort of like splitting up the mind into a million different directions. And that's the idea of the oligarchs, to break you down and then rebuild you in their image. And we took this, and we even talked about the American Civil War, to break them down and to rebuild the South into the image of the oligarchs. And I had a great comment, if we get it to it today, from Cameron, who talked about people that could live, they could work their whole career at NASA and never realize that, I don't know if this is edgy for people, but we possibly didn't go to the moon, if you're not familiar with that. But the idea would never strike them. It's the compartmentalization, the Manhattan Project, the very organization of the diaspora people was really made on this need-to-know basis with this built-in biopolitical deference without questioning authority. And so it really comes out of making Christians think in a very in a very fleshly way. So that's this bigger project, to think not of your consciousness being directed toward the beatific vision, the utopian vision of God, but rather you're getting rewired to want to you're drawn in by the appeals of the utopian visions of man and the promises of man. And sometimes, depending on how solid your theology is and your eschatology is, it's easy to kind of get hoodwinked into this kind of thinking. And they were making it harder because their goal is to rewire the brain of the Western man and woman. So yes, they're trying to break it apart. And so it's nothing short of including the whole Western democratic system, including the American system, is nothing less than assault on the Catholic social order to bring in a new order and a new direction. So that's what's being broken apart. And so when we say an expression like Gnostic thinking, it begins with this alienation from the ground of being, for this order of being, because this is considered the Dark Ages. Right. And I'll just say, by the way, I tell students right now, in middle and 19th century in America, everybody was educated at home. There was a handful of colleges. There were no high schools. People learned at home. And I remind them, during the Civil War, the working vocabulary of an American was 40,000 words. And I ask students, what do you think it is today? Like 100,000? You guys are so smart. And they don't like to hear this, right? It's when I started teaching, it was 10,000. And now with the advance of smartphones, it's 5,000 words. That's thousands of concepts you don't have at your fingertips. I show them a newspaper from 1875. And I say, try to pronounce some of the words on that page, because that's what farmers read, and they'd shut down. They're not introduced to this language because the 1900s were the Dark Ages, the same way that people living in the 1400s is the Dark Ages to us. And they were part of this monopoly of the evil church, and everything had to be terrible because Constantine was one big conspiracy and Christ wasn't meant to be part of an empire. And I argue, no, it wasn't. The opposite, that indeed, that's a universal form of, I think, the will of God wanted people to live in an empire with subsidiarity, what we call Catholic integralism. You could speak different languages, have different cultures, be a part of your own group, but all minds were directed by the kings and the hierarchy with one goal. And what was Christ's desire? Unity. The ancient problem of unity, the problem of the one and many, was solved by the Catholic social order. All minds, even the kings, bent down before Christ into this common mission that we would enter, whoever wishes it to be baptized into the kingdom of heaven, and we are all being directed into the beatific vision. And we shared that unity, and we overcame the ancient problem of the one and the many through the Eucharist. And so the mystical body of Christ was fed. Men could not make up such a system. And I know some people that are involved in a certain kind of modern egregore think of that as some kind of monopoly of power that had to be broken down. And I'm arguing, until you get that idea that that was the will of God, yes, people are imperfect. The wheat and tares live together in the same church. However, that's base reality. That's taking the fullness of reality, both the eminent, what we see, what we feel, what we can measure, and what we cannot see, the heavenly and the earthly, and putting it together into the fullness of reality as God wants us to apprehend it in order to stay on the track into our own salvation. So we talked about that, a proper a Catholic social order. You know, the first word on there, sacred, set apart, holy. And that's the key word that was unique starting in the first century with the earliest Christians, was the idea we're all created in the image of God. I mean, just turn the world upside down. Turn the world upside down. And all of the great things we inherit today, concepts of natural law, or at least the concepts of morality and ethics that we take, that's all working off the fumes of this concept that we do have dignity by virtue of being human and being made in the image of God. And so from those assumptions that we could only have through our theology, through the New Testament, that understanding of God, the new anthropology of man, could we build Christian civilization? And the goal of modern society is to break it apart, break apart the world system, break apart the university system into separate entities that are no longer able to communicate each other, and ultimately break apart your brain. The holistic concept of the spirit and body acting together. And that's the frontal piece of the attack. And now I'll finish this off with the Rockefeller piece of all of this, to break the human mind down. And we know that totalitarians traditionally have used this technique, whether we want to talk about a Manchurian candidate, where you break somebody's brain apart and then you rebuild them into the wishes of the trainer. So from this, we create behavioral science, this word that we do. Why are you educated? You always educate to make more money, to have a more secure job. You know, this is the world, everything, you know, homo economist, we're all just kind of cash machines walking through life. And we've come so far from the understanding of what is a good life, what is the purpose of life in a Christian worldview. And so nothing short of this cosmic conspiracy in the 20th century was headed by, I'm going to call it the cabal. I don't think that's a crazy word. It's a handful of the super rich, and they were interconnected. And we're going to focus on the Rockefeller piece. In my classes, again, just this week, we talked about the robber barons, the progressive era, the new wealth that came about in the late 19th century for names that we still hear sometimes today: Vanderbilt, Pullman, Mellon, Carnegie, Rockefeller. And these all made their wealth from the railroad system, which monopolized the rest of the economy through price fixing, etc. So you had this small group of people, oftentimes people like J.P. Morgan, when their estate was finally dissected at the end, they realized most of the holdings belonged in the city of London, by the real cabal. So there's this world system that comes out. That was part of the book that we read this week, The Leipzig Connection. So we can see it with religion, we can see it with economics and the control of the stock markets, and we can see it in the university system. There was indeed a network, and underneath that there was an agenda to rewire the minds of, and to break apart, really. Bloom wrote a book in 1987 called Alan Bloom in 1987 called The Closing of the American Mind. And this is exactly what he's talking about, the fulfillment of this Enlightenment project, where we think we have all these specialties and we can talk about gender studies and on and on. And today with the internet, we have more. The more that we have and the more we go in this direction away from base reality, the more our minds are closed. And I think that's how we're blinded from the obvious tyranny that they're putting in our faces. Just sketchy they make these psyops these days. So, yeah, it's the work of these people. The ultimate goal is transhumanism, to merge us with the AI. It's the beast system, and it's an ancient project. They can call it the apotheosis of men. It comes out of the lodges. It's the apotheosis of man. It's the inversion of the mystical body of Christ, leading human beings into the mystical body of Antichrist. It starts with really Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus. He was part of the cabal back there in the Lunatic Society. I think I did a video 9 years ago about that. And they couldn't release these crazy ideas really until the mid-19th century. But you can see the people that were part of the cabal, sometimes they're called the Continentalists, sometimes they have Anglo names. But you can see the hatred for humanity and the fact that they saw people as meat puppets. And, Thomas Malthus, one of the original population bomb freaks, he was an Anglican minister talking in the first decade or two of the 19th century. And he's talking about the poor people. We need to put them in the worst of conditions. So hopefully they basically get in crowded conditions so we can make them sick and we don't have to deal with them anymore. This is a new level of hatred. This didn't exist in Christendom. This level, this type of thinking really rears its head with the advance of industrialization and the creation of the eugenics movement. And that's critical to what we're talking about that enters into our modern education system. But it's going on many fronts. I mentioned in my book, Seeing Through the Singularity, by the way, both the books, links will be in the description section. Huxley, famously saying there's going to be a moment in the future when we've acquired all the knowledge. Think of AI and what they're trying to do right now. The whole concept of the singularity is there's going to be a breakaway moment. And at that fit moment, there will be a jihad, a holy war. And that's when you're going to bring in you're going to really sever, you're going to make all the old concepts of Christ kosher in preparation, frankly, for Noahide. And so it's part of a deep eugenics program. We have so many, this is Hillary Clinton's favorite person. And she would say, we have to, the Negroes are sprouting up like weeds. We have to get rid of them. So she was the mother of the family planning, and she's still celebrated today. You couldn't say, I believe she was Catholic. You couldn't say anything perhaps more anti-Catholic than the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world. Wow, she's really prepping people for the green agenda like 100 years ago. Your breath is killing Gaia. So this is really twisted thinking. This is the psychopathology of the quote unquote elite that are running the world, that are really getting everything locked and loaded for their depopulation program. It's long and running. Their hatred of man, their hatred of the image of God in man, and their unique hatred for the image of Christ in man. So, of course, the Rockefellers, if you're not familiar, they reinvented Rockefeller medicine in for the industrial age, and men were meat puppets. And if you couldn't observe, measure, and predict something, or I guess sometimes we say reproduce the experiment, that it had no purpose. They were not interested in the spiritual dimensions of man. And so they created the business model that we know and love, that is, really reached another quantum level with the selling of their pharmaceuticals. And again, the book of Revelations tells us that they will deceive us through their pharmakia, their pharmaceuticals. I think actually it's their sorcery, but it's probably a combination of both. But we really saw that at work over the last 5 years with the Gnostic mind virus that spread. Again, it's a shapeshifter. It doesn't always have to be this idea of the demiurge and the good God. It's this idea where you're really separating, your brain is allowed to separate. You're getting into buying into the utopian visions of man. And increasingly, if you've heard stories this week about medveds, I don't know if they're waiting to release this through their DARPA program, but it has these promises that they could stick you in. I don't know if this is true or not. They can stick you in these beds and you can regrow limbs and endless kind of promises. But again, the economy and whatnot will have to be broken down because they have prearranged the promises that will occur in the Great Reset age. But over here, we have Rockefeller's. Of course, he's saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. And that comes from the German bureaucratic notion of building the machine, the bureaucratic machine from the ground up. So we don't question authority. And so one of the powerful things they would introduce was Dick and Jane style of reading, phonetics. The numbers just crashed down, it broke the mind apart, but they kept, through their federal dollars and incentives, they kept pushing more and more of this, frankly, debasing form of education in order to fully rewire the minds, the wants and the needs of the population. And so we more or less ended there, and we talked a little bit again about want and the connections in each university that everybody went to, but it's powerful to think about the Rockefellers' control and their interest in divinity schools. Of course, they had to put their Schofield Darby shenanigans in some of the famous divinity schools, especially in Texas. That would be kind of the star school for all the rest of them. But they also created the whole idea of the 401c3, the idea that basically the church is working for the synagogue. If we don't like what you're saying, we'll pull your money. It affected, obviously, Catholics big time in Vatican II and Nostra Aetate. And it's this idea of what can be said and what cannot be said. The blindness to the tyranny now we're talking about in the medical institution, through our media. And through our school system. So it's a world that we've been biopolitically inundated with in a full spectrum domination scenario that we all grew up in. And I think once we understand it, and I'll just give you a simple scenario that we mentioned today, it's helpful that we all probably bought into this huge lie at some point. You wanted to kind of seem smart in school, and it was laughable to believe in creation. 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's only the last few years. And a lot of it is helpful. First of all, to get somebody to trust that you think he's a smart Catholic, a smart theologian, and they're willing to come out. Because it was always kind of painted through the divinity schools. They wanted kind of the snake holders, the guy with the big bouffant hair and the big watches and the televangelist to talk about, they wanted those kind of guys to talk about it. Nobody wanted to be those kind of guys that talked about it. But you think about it, once you see it as a conspiracy, it's kind of like space. Once you see it as a conspiracy, there's zero evidence that one fossil came to it. There's zero intermediary links. There's zero evidence, yet everybody believed it. But once you see that it was actually, once you get out of the paradigm, you're saying like, dang, that makes no sense. It makes no sense once you get out of it. And it's really helpful to start getting back into theology once you can trust the way God revealed scripture to us with a 7-day creation and all of the rest. That's a little bit of an add-on for me to talk about this. So I'm going to continue a little bit, and I want to talk about some of the comments, and I can only hit on some because they're so amazing. And I'm just going to go in order. So everybody in the community, I'm not picking these on any basis. I'm just going straight down the page. And I'm going to get as far as I can. Some of them I thought were fun. I might skip. Some of them made a comment about the thumbnail. Like that alone should be saying something to people. But the first one on here is from Henry. More than once, Bishop Williamson declared in an unapologetic tone, "We are at war." Here in Finland, Foreign companies like Microsoft, Google, and TikTok. By the way, I saw a little clip this morning of a reporter in Finland asking the president about Gaza, because this is what tips this up. This is what precipitated this conversation today. The fact that people that call themselves Christians are not standing up for the least among us. That's what we're specifically called to do. If you love me, if you deny me in front of others, I'll deny you in front of the Father. What you do to the least among us, you do to me. I mean, this is salvation stuff, y'all. Okay. So the reporter asked the president, just while he's walking into his car, he's arrested in Finland. I had to mention that. I just saw it this morning. He spoke pretty good English. It looks like you have fabulous English here, Henry. So TikTok are currently building data centers, taking full advantage of our long borders in Russia. And I'll just show you just how thorough these answers are with our community. Additional videos and very long, thoughtful forms that we'll be reading from. So it's so refreshing to see the power of a community using threads in their fullest. And not just, I thought that guy was a jerk. Okay. So full advantage of our long border with Russia and the fear that it generates, which justifies the construction of a bio-digital war economy. The digital conquista of the entire population does not seem to bother anyone. The focus is instead on the economic benefits of these projects. Exactly what we're saying. What's even worse is that even if people understand the demonic nature of the bio-digital endgame, that what is happening has nothing to do with their safety and protection, but everything to do with biopolitical and spiritual war and control. Back to the supposition from Bishop Williamson. We are at war, and we seem to be blind to this. How can you fight for Holy Mother Church? How can you fight for your own salvation if you don't want to wake up to these things? Pull off the blindfold. I am afraid they would not care. It feels like evil and lies have generated such intellectual and spiritual exhaustion, apathy, and nihilism in the general public that for most people, the apocalypse has already happened. Love it, love it, love it. I think one of the best explanations for the state of things can be found in silent weapons for quiet wars. We're in 6th generational warfare time. And this is what I say. I know it's not, that's why I call it the spectacle, and I'll be a little critical now. If you're afraid to talk about psyops because you think it makes you sound like one of them, you're not dealing with the warfare in front of us. That is the warfare. It's more than nudging with algorithms. It's the psyops themselves, and then the controlled media spin comes afterwards. And that's what you got to understand. And I believe that's heavily part of what Scripture talks about when it talks about signs and wonders. At least I believe that's a foothold into it. So the public, quote, the public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. Exactly. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but because of the technical nature of the silent weapon, they cannot express their feelings in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Dang, that's exactly why I asked this. You put that so brilliantly. If English is your second language, this is insane. Therefore, they do not know how to associate with others or defend themselves against it. When the silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment in their lives. Of course, that's the boiling of the frog. And learns to tolerate its encroachment unto our lives until the pressure, i.e. psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological weapon. It attacks the vitality, options, understanding, manipulating and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I do a good job of going into that. That doesn't sound nice. I like my chapter 10, and it goes into this heavily. And one of the people, because I go into a lot of thinkers from the 1950s who got heavily into the nature of totalitarianism and what it did to the mind and the techniques and so forth. Vogelin was one. Another one was Leo Strauss, and one that I go into heavy. It's called The Demonic in Politics. And Juice Malou, the Dutch thinker, mentioned many of the things you did. These are classic totalitarian techniques to blind you to their tyranny. Sandy, I agree. I propose 80% of the population is what was referred to after World War I as shell-shocked. And that would be one of the excuses to bring on the Tavistock Institute to help rewire their minds. And again, they had a foot in education, but they were especially in media. We went even last week into atonal structures that were introduced, for one, with the idea of the Beatles. I don't want to get too crazy, but literally getting us off of the classical keys. And I know that sounds crazy, these frequencies and tonality, but there was a reason that the church forbid what the metal players would call the devil's thirds. These frequencies that are all around us. We know they retuned phonographs. They biopolitically tried to rewire our minds in every conceivable way. So it's a good point. Good point, Sandy. I'm continuing with Sandy here. Too much trauma causes the mind to find a way to cope and function, but other brain areas suffer, like loss of memory, enhanced anxiety, or withdrawal from society, as some examples. I had PTSD from working in San Francisco from 1984 to 2006. When I moved back home, I'll just call it New York, Sandy, to a town outside of Buffalo where I was raised, and in the last of a tiny bit of Christendom. I will add more later, but 100% agree, Henry. Excellent lecture, as always. We'll need to replay, and then we'll respond to the questions. Too kind when someone's listening to me twice. But that, Sandy, that's exactly to pull in our own experiences, our own sets of information that we had anecdotally. There was times I used to say half my life in New York City, but I'm getting older now. But between Boston and New York City, still about half my life. And yeah, I think the city made me crazy. I think there is a pathology with people that have lived there their whole life. I don't want to sound judgy. It's not everybody. People can overcome it. And I know a lot of city people are on here. But for one, I'm just saying the noise, the perpetual noise, that's what got to me. I'm not saying city people, so don't take it the wrong way. But the city noise, which for me had to become white noise. And as a cranky older dude at this point in my life, I just hate squealy noises or the sound of a bus stopping. I just hate that. Okay, I shouldn't get off of my own thing, but I just love silence. I just love the sound of silence. I hate leaf blowers that you can hear from 3 blocks away. But yeah, all these little stresses put little fractures in our psyche. And so I thought that was a good point. And when the programmers want to break down a mind, that's what they do. They give you conflicting messages. They introduce a lot of different kinds of noise. And that's our coping mechanism as we try to find a spot in our brain where we can go just to survive. John Carter, great intro. I'm trying to think of the intro. Oh, I had an intro of 3 minutes of Charlie Kirk and all the oddities. Like, why? I mean, look, you don't have to go down every rabbit hole, but please, the mainstream story at this point. I mean, even a lot of the influencers had to kind of cover their butts after the Candace thing and say maybe, and then we'll move on. Yeah, that was quite a psychological operation. It's part of this bigger scheme to, frankly, soften us up for the Great Reset. But great intro. I mean, the number of anomalies, no funeral, no autopsy. Why did they book the stadium of the memorial months in advance? And on and on and on and on, selling the house 5 months before, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And like I said last week, once you kind of get the main moves, there's no point in following it forever. I think it becomes, it has its own danger built in when someone, I suppose, becomes obsessed with it. Great intro. It made me think of participating in multiple BBC documentaries down in Brazil. The director of one show told me how ashamed he was of doing so many fake productions for Animal Planet and Discovery Channel to include doping an alligator as part of the act. Some actors jumping on its back and pretending to wrestle it. You can't make this stuff up. See, the climate's even making the frogs gay and the alligators dizzy. So some guys out there wrestling an alligator to get the right shot to send back to the dupes watching this. Should I do you again, Sandy? Let me do just a little bit. And here is a badly, boldly calling them out yesterday. I stopped watching. Oh, it's Dr. Taylor Marshall. Now he had to have a picture of Candace and do it. I don't want to seem like I'm throwing rocks. Well, okay, whatever. So she sent, my dearest 65-year-old childhood Catholic friend asked me to watch this yesterday. I sent her a Dr. Deep State podcast and other podcasts, always sharing. I am not a scholar with scripture nor the Bible, so I don't know what to make of this. I watched a clip of Tucker Carlson interviewing a guest about Kabbalah yesterday. The brilliant and good doctor's work resonating. Thank you. You're too kind, Sandy. Dean. So yeah, everybody had to kind of cover themselves up for that. But for the most part, people seem to be, don't want to look there. Not good for business. Dean, the ultimate mind virus is the terrible judgment sent by God against those who reject his son, the truth. And with all the deceitfulness and unjustness in them that perish. Oh, deceivableness. I'm not familiar with that word. That perish because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this cause, God will send them up for a strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I have a J friend from the old days, and all he can believe and act on is the lie that is presented. It is confounding. And I can't hear that enough, that maybe it's that simple. You did not sufficiently love the fullness, and some commentaries have that, the fullness, not the easy truths, the fullness of truth. God makes them believe a lie. And I think the theological explanation is the most powerful. But we're trying to hit it from another direction, a number of directions here. Michael. Regarding associating anti-Sem with mental illness, I sent a video this week, once again, as softening us up for the Noahide, that they are putting again forward that if somebody recognizes or is pro-terror, that they're going to be, there's new pathological indicators. They're going to call you crazy and institutionalize yourself. They're just pushing it more and more and more. It's not like they're going to stop until people push back and say, I've had enough. And what I'm arguing that the saints argued is you have to identify the enmity. And that's what Vatican II, Nostra Aetate, blurred. So we have to understand what was blurred to get clear, to see base reality once again. So I absolutely believe the government will ultimately marry anti-Sem legislation with red flag laws. And that's where you're hooking up with the homelessness and other surveillance. Yep. Our darling Zionist governor in Florida is a fan of both. as I'm sure other govs and legislatures are as well. And now that there is open and constitutional carry in Florida, there will be greater pressure to strengthen the red flag laws. And when I had the 10 amendments there, that's number 2. They're pushing on that, always have been, but in conjunction with everything else going on. I have no expectations of having any pry my guns out of my cold dead hands. Is that like that's a Charlton Heston expression, which is a frequent refrain of the "don't tread on me" crowd. I don't believe it's possible to be Catholic without being anti-Sem. That's a strong statement, and I agree with you, Donald. Thank you for saying that. Now, people would have questioned whatever definition was floating around 5 years ago, but I'm saying this over and over, and I'm going to stress it in my new book. If we support the significant essential passage of Scripture that makes Christianity Christianity, and we defend the church, that alone, plus defend the church as the great saints that constructed civilization did, we are considered anti-Semitic. So that's why the last chapter of the book is when Christ became hate speech. So if you're still cowering to that concept, things have changed so much in 2 years. They're straight on telling you, if you don't want to make your religion kosher and purify Christianity for us, the people doing the work over there, I mean, it's right there in your face. If you notice what's going on and if you dare to speak about it, you're anti-Sem. We're at that point, right? There's many people saying that, besides Ben Gavir and so forth. It's getting to be a popular refrain. So as Catholics right now, that's how they get us, for fear of the Jays. And that's their key buzzword that they, through their CIA, this is before the CIA. It's actually an ancient concept. I don't believe it's possible to be Catholic without being anti-Sem, at least not according to the ever-shifting definition that the synagogue pushes. So much truth is hidden, glossed over, ignored, because Catholics are afraid of being labeled anti-Sem. One thing people used to say about Trump in the previous term was that he was afraid because he was owned. That he owned the downside. Catholics need to own the downside and expect that we might and likely will lose everything. What a blessing for sticking to the truth. Thank you very much, great Michael. Exactly, says Sandy. Being Catholic now is anti-Sem. And she says more, but I already hit you a couple times, Sandy. John Carter again, the hardest part of coming to grips with the mess is coming to grips with how the fabric of our American culture is stitched with violence. And I think E. Michael Jones' book makes a couple good points in that regard as well. Our knee-jerk reaction is always to grab a gun. It was my reaction until recently. True courage is to face tyranny in the face with a rosary in hand, not a Glock. Thanks for making that point. Dean again, blind to tyranny photo. I better start hitting some other people. Cameron, things are so fragmented. By the way, Cameron made this response before the presentation I just said about the fragmenting of the mind to make it fragment away. That's alienation from the ground of reality, from the holistic Christian understanding of body and soul. So fragmenting our mind in order to technique of totalitarians, in order that we become instruments for of their will for their purposes. Cameron, right here. Things are so fragmented into different areas and departments that we have situations where a man works at NASA his whole life on rocket coordinates without ever finding out the moon landings were a hoax. But it's also willful ignorance. People willfully separate things in their mind and play mental gymnastics. Like how many Catholic Americans are faithful to the church and its teachings, yet still revere Protestant Illuminati Mason George Washington. Jorge Washington as a hero. A lot of people don't like to hear that. It's very true. I agree with you completely there, Cameron. I agree with you completely. I do. And that was just a great point, that the notion of biopolitics that came around was it's slowly being, it really kind of takes off with Foucault in the 1970s, but it's being developed in Germany and so forth, and Sweden in different fragments. But it has to do with the breaking down of the university system, the breaking down of the mind. And one of the core concepts of biopolitics is the concept, and Foucault would definitely bring this to light, and I think Giorgio Agamben brought it further. Many of the people I cite in biopolitics are in my book, Seeing Through the Singularity. And there's a whole bunch in the Anglo tradition that talk about biodigital convergence 25 years ago. And this is in peer-reviewed material, Seeing Through the Singularity. But the essential part of biopolitics that Foucault would say is the system wants you to police yourself. And so it's inundated in our institutions, in our healthcare, in our prison systems, in our education systems. And what Altman's doing with his oracle, and he's telling everybody, it is not just some off-the-wall TED Talk, he's putting it out there in all the forums. That's what they want. They want to hook you into surveillance gears so we don't have to have cops anymore because everybody's surveilled. I mean, this is so 1984 on steroids. It's not even, and there's no pushback. Nobody's even talking about what a threat to Christianity this is. Because that is what's targeted ultimately. It's reality, and Christ is reality. It's an attack on the ontological attack on reality, an ontological attack on truth. And that's what Christ is. Christ came to attest for truth. He came to attest for God in this world. So I see the clock is kind of going on here a little bit. So I'll do a couple more. It's great to mention. I'm sure everybody's seen Yuri Brezhnov's, but he talked about the communist piece of this. And what's important with that is within a generation, or sometimes called 3 decades, there is a program in place, and there was in the Western world, especially, you could start from the 50s, but it's to rewire the Western mind and to debase it. And, and what we would call that in theology is sin makes us dumb, right? And so we become blind to tyranny. And that will be more susceptible to accept socialism or communism. But those words are really coming on right now through techno-utopia. So it's all of the ideas from the left and the right that are coming together. And it's a new type of collectivism under Noahide laws. Serafina. So as far as our commenters, Serafina's fun. She's always got good ones. So I'll get a little bit of Serafina. It is the gesture of Kali, the Hindu goddess of war. Oh my gosh, you always got crazy stuff. I love this right now. I saw some 13-year-old whiz kid that was talking. He's like this math prodigy, physics prodigy, and he's going into like Tesla type of formulas of what's going on CERN, and they really are tinkering around with time. And what theorists have been saying for over 10 years, that they're trying to create holes, portals, ripping the fabric of reality. This is part of the Kabbalah project of merging what they call heaven and earth, which is that ethereal realm with ours. In scripture, we call this the restrainer. They're trying to break the restrainer to bring those elements into our reality and bugger our minds. And it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. And yeah, they have the Hindu statue of Kali, of chaos. And so again, the totalitarians, they try to use contradiction to create a double-mindedness. Scripture tells us not to be double-minded, because a double-minded man is unwise and unbalanced in all his ways. So yeah, they're trying to really just tear at the fabric of reality itself. So Kali is a prominent Hindu goddess associated with destruction, time, and doomsday, often depicted as a fierce warrior who destroys evil demons to protect the innocent. She is considered a manifestation of the divine feminine energy and is revered as both a terrifying destroyer and a powerful mother figure. The full name of the goddess is Ma Diva. This is the demonic goddess that Kamala Harris was named after by her mother. I did not know that. I did not know that. Okay. Of course, contrary to public opinion, she did not fail in the mission she was given. She was not elected president, but her mission was to get DJT elected and given hero status in the process. Exactly. Of course, this also explains the last-minute multi-part expose done on Harris by change agent Candace Owens. How do you think Owens had access seemingly overnight to all the damning history of Harris? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And it goes on. Should I go a little bit more? I always enjoy your stuff, Serafina. This is also why we saw a particular gesture, sticking out the tongue, pushed by those in the music industry, controlled by the demons, i.e. Miley Cyrus, Jack Nicholson, etc., etc. Even Albert Einstein, the famous picture. Yeah, it's very in your face part of the program. So I'm up to an hour and 20 minutes, and I love reading my community's comments, and I just wanted to give you a little sense of that. And of course, encourage anybody that wants to become a member. It's $5 a month, and you can quit at any time. We find that most people stick around and really enjoy becoming part of the community. And we do this stuff to help each other stay sane, keep our minds in order, and to engage in Catholic fellowship. And the community has blossomed into something I could never even imagine. And I'm so happy just to be part of the community. And again, links are in the description. Thank you for spending time today with Dr. Deep State, and blessings to everyone.
To stand here in this holy place with my fellow artists, world leaders, and all of you beautiful souls, my humblest and sincerest thanks. First and foremost, I want to sincerely thank His Holiness Pope Leo for opening the doors to this sacred place to us all and reminding us that true compassion and grace begin with fraternity, seeing one another as brothers and sisters and fellow human beings and fellow siblings. Thank you to Cardinal Gambetti, Andrea Bocelli, Kimball Musk, and Nova Sky. And to all the artists, yes, and to all the artists, hey, and to all the artists who have brought their bright light to this moment. Today, I want you to understand that I and all of us, we feel grace, we feel love. Do you feel it too? But what is grace? Grace is a light that lives in each of us, waiting to be shared. Not just a blessing that we receive, but a force that we extend to one another. Beneath every culture, every language, every story is the same breath, the same spirit, the same light, the light of the universe, the all that is, all that ever will be. This is an opportunity for all of the light to come together. And I feel that we're not doing enough. This is an opportunity for people to galvanize and recognize their strength in numbers. We still haven't done that as a species. We still haven't asked ourselves, for the sake of humanity, far beyond the reaches and constrictions of different religions, can we just hold hands for a moment and see the light that we have? You guys, put your cell phones in the air. Turn the lights on. Put your cell phones in the air. Let them see you in the world. The power that we have when we come together. This is 300,000 lights, all denominations. The only way to get to that light is to have grace for others. Too often humanity sees difference as danger. We judge before we understand, but grace whispers, wait, and curiosity asks, why? Imagine if instead of saying, you are not like me, we ask, what can I learn from you? What light do you carry that I do not? And just maybe on the other side of that question mark is the answer. Right there waiting for everyone. Grace makes space, curiosity leans in. Together they can carry us toward one another. Grace and curiosity are not luxuries, but guys, they are remedies. Remedies for division, which there's so much in the world right now. That light, hold it up. Because there's division, there's despair. Well, you can shine your light on the rest of the world. This is how walls become windows and how borders become bridges. How your light becomes my light and my light becomes yours. Make some noise for the light. So we gotta have grace for the world if we ever want to get to that light, to that place. So in this historic moment, I ask you to choose grace, choose curiosity, choose them until they become contagious. And together we will flood the world with this light and this love, not with power and pride, but with light and love, always with the light and love. Thank you.
I'm Father Copenhagen from Rochester, New York. There's a saying, qui tacet consentiri videtur, ubi loqui debuit ac potuit. Who is silent is seen to consent where he can and must speak. In my home state and others, many Catholic families of conscience are now forced to homeschool, while that is still tolerated, or to become refugees to states that still permit the free exercise of religion. There are many here who make compelling scientific and personal cases. I'm here to make a religious and a moral case for Catholics and for all to hear. Most people are misinformed about actual church teaching on the issue of immorally produced fetal cell lines, those obtained through the taking of innocent human life, and the stolen DNA present in many mandated vaccines. The result is that Catholics are unrepresented in a moral fight that is ours by right and by duty. Everywhere I see faithful Catholics numbingly going against the instincts of conscience because they are convinced that the Church has given an unconditional green light to the use of these cell lines. Let's set the record straight. The closest thing we have to actual public teaching is an officially endorsed ethical reflection in the Church from 2005. Almost always, when the document is brought up, it is cherry-picked for the paragraph which says these vaccines can be used where no ethically produced alternative exists. The most crucial qualifiers are then unseen by families, schools, and those involved in public debate. So let's look at what the document actually says and what's going unheard. It tells us, first, it is impossible to be a practicing Catholic who is right with God while directly and willingly involved in the creation, production, or marketing of these vaccines. The same holds for public officials who impose them. Secondly, it tells us the use of these products must be only as an extrema ratio. An extreme means a last resort where there is a genuine need, an actual emergency, which means that if my well-informed prudential judgment says there is no imminent risk, as a Catholic, I should refuse the vaccine. Where is the emergency? Is there really a perpetual health crisis everywhere which justifies their imposition everywhere? No. Is it really necessary to sacrifice one human life to save another? No. Our Lord gave his life. It wasn't taken from him. Third, the use of these vaccines can only be temporary. As a Catholic, I can't cooperate with their indefinite use or treat them as a fixed solution. Fourth, it says that those in the Church must be publicly and vociferously opposed to the creation and imposition of these products. Fifth, it even says that we must reasonably resort to conscientious objection. Conscientious objection by refusing them. Quote from the document issued from the Vatican, there remains a moral duty to continue to fight and to employ every lawful means in order to make life difficult for the pharmaceutical industries which act unscrupulously and unethically. And sixth, a point you don't usually hear, there is no word on an aspect of the issue which some Catholic ethicists have raised, that the use of these lines is a form of theft and desecration of human remains, which must not be used at all, but respectfully reposed instead of endlessly exploited. Do the above points from that document sound anything like the wholesale cooperation that it's being twisted into? Does that sound anything like, just go along with evil, get your shot and shut up or don't show your face in public? Yet that's what so many Catholics are being told. In the end, the decision about whether we participate in evil is not made in the courtroom, not in the legislative chamber, not in a governor's executive office, not in a corporate boardroom. The decision is made in conscience, in free will, and in the willingness to sacrifice. Whether or not we are given the permission by secular powers to do what is right is not the final word, because there is a higher law, and faith tells me that I'm accountable to that highest lawgiver. Amen. And so to everyone I say, it is not good, it is not right, it is not conscionable to participate in so clear an evil, not for the empty promise of a scientific utopia, especially not for the dystopia we see emerging all around us. To my fellow Catholics, I say, the one who is silent gives consent. Wake up and fight for the truth. Stop rolling over and fight for moral medical practices across the board. If you don't put what is right before what is convenient, if you don't refuse to compromise with evil, you are going to wake up in a nightmare where a gruesome medical dictatorship is the only religion allowed. If you think I'm exaggerating, read the things being suggested in the professional journals. Listen to real-life stories like you hear here. Look at other countries. And to the governors, to the judges, to all the public figures who share the name Catholic while undermining everything that your church stands for. Stop persecuting the church into which you were baptized. Stop persecuting Jesus Christ in his people. Remember that there is a judgment higher than the courts and the legislatures or any circle of cocktail party sycophants. There is an impartial judge who cannot be bought, who does not measure the world in dollars and power and praise, but in good and evil, in right and wrong, and in a truth which does not pass away. Glory be to the holy, consubstantial, life-giving, and undivided Trinity, now and always, and forever and ever. Amen.